Welcome to Ignatius Press Off the Shelf. We continue our discussion of G.K. Chesterton's Everlasting Man. We were not able to complete all three chapters we'd hoped to do in the last session, 3, 4, and 5. So we're going to begin now with chapter 5, Man and Mythologies. Remember Chesterton's classification of God, the gods, the demons, the philosophers? Well, man and mythologies has to do with the gods. Where do they come from? What is mythology? And Joseph, you're in charge of this, but I keep interfering. How do you want to proceed? I want you to read something, page 104. But
Yeah, I have nothing prior to 104, so I'll let me know what you'd like me to read, and I shall do my best.
Vivian?
Well, I just think we should start off with his premise here on page 101. All this at the top, toward the top, all this mythological business belongs to the poetical part of man. It seems strangely forgotten nowadays that a myth is a work of imagination and therefore a work of art.
And just a preview here, he is going to show myths as work of the imagination and philosophy as work of the intellect, and how these two approaches to God never came together until the myth became fact, you know.
Yeah, but also the understanding, of course, imagination is our imagination is a mark of the imago Dei in us. So imagination is not something which is contrary to our quest for God. On the contrary, it's something necessary for our
Yes.
quest for God.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, also, he will, because the beautiful thing about this book, one of the many beautiful things, is that it may not seem highly structured, but it is. There's a definite structure, chapter by chapter, to this book. But within each chapter and throughout the book, he will take the same theme or the same idea and come different angles, express it different ways, and you kind of get lost in the luxuriance, if you will, of his expression. But another way he approaches this myth versus philosophy is picture versus diagram. We'll see that. We'll see that little binary thing come through here. Well, Joseph, I would like you to read from page 104 at the bottom, where it says it is often said that pagan mythology ... to the end of that paragraph. And if you wish, you can pause and comment while you're reading, but you don't have to.
Okay, now, Father, page 104, it is often said, I'm not finding it at the moment. Whereabouts is it?
About 12 lines from the bottom or so,
12 lines. Oh, yeah, got it. Okay. And you want me to read till when?
to the end of the paragraph on the next page.
Got it. Okay. It is often said that pagan mythology was a personification of the powers of nature. The phrase is true in a sense, but it is very unsatisfactory because it implies that the forces are abstractions and the personification is artificial. Myths are not allegories. Natural powers are not, in this case, abstractions. It is not as if there were a god of gravitation. There may be a genius of the waterfall, but not of mere falling, even less than of mere water. The impersonation is not of something impersonal. The point is that the personality perfects the water with
Let's
significance.
pause right there. Isn't that a beautiful expression? These
Absolutely. And I
myths.
say, I was wondering, yeah, I could stop all the time. I thought what I would do is probably resist the temptation and get to the end of the paragraph and then comment,
Okay,
just
go ahead.
because
Go ahead.
it would probably be quicker. And then obviously other people can also append their own comments.
Okay.
Father Christmas is not an allegory of snow and holly. He is not merely the stuff called snow afterwards artificially given a human form, like a snowman. He is something that gives a new meaning to the white world and the evergreens, so that snow itself seems to be warm rather than cold. The test, therefore, is purely imaginative. But imaginative does not mean imaginary. It does not follow that it is all what the moderns call subjective when they mean false. Every true artist does feel, consciously or unconsciously, that he is touching transcendental truths, that his images are shadows of things seen through the veil. In other words, the natural mystic does know that there is something there, something beyond the clouds or within the trees, but he believes that the pursuit of beauty is the way to find it, that imagination is a sort of incantation that can call it up. Yeah, so the way I would like to talk about this is to give examples. I mean, the Tolkien was hugely influenced by G.K. Chesterton in his own philosophy of myth. C.S. Lewis was not just hugely influenced by G.K. Chesterton, he was hugely influenced by this particular book, which he actually says in Surprised by Joy was a key milestone in his own coming to Christ. So the key thing is here that Lewis and Tolkien and Chesterton do not like allegory, but what they mean by that is personified abstraction. And so, the examples I like to give, I mean, we could give examples from Pilgrim's Progress, but I prefer Pilgrim's Regress, C.S. Lewis's book. And in that book, we see a monster called the Spirit of the Age. And there are many people imprisoned by the Spirit of the Age. And the Spirit of the Age is ultimately vanquished by a beautiful woman in shining armor whose name is Reason. And Reason has two younger sisters called Theology and Philosophy. Now, that's personified abstraction. And that's when you're using, uh, um, uh, 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 yeah, uh, you're trying to just relay abstract ideas, abstract concepts by giving them a personified facade, but there's no character in these people, there's no personality, and what you're doing is teaching, not telling a story, which is why so we get in Narnia, Aslan reminds us of Christ, but he isn't Christ. Aragorn's descent into the past of the dead reminds us of Christ's descent into hell following the crucifixion, but Aragorn is not Christ. These are not personified abstractions. These are characters in a story, myth being another word for story. So that's the very, very important difference here. And that's why Father Christmas, and that's why nymphs are not personified abstractions. They're somehow the spiritual presence in the trees. It's not the tree is a nymph. No, there's something spiritual about trees. And so there's probably spirits that live in them, right? So it's a very different way of understanding things.
One thing the Enlightenment did in rationalism is it kind of divided man, reason on the one side and emotion on the other, and imagination is part of the emotional side of man. And Chesterton, Tolkien, and Lewis are actually reintegrating man and valorizing, if you will, the role of emotion and of imagination in man's humanity. And to me, that is rooted in Christ himself, who did not speak in abstractions very often. He did say, I am the way and the truth and the life. Okay, that's somewhat abstract. But he told stories, and he himself was a story in a sense, right? And so the Enlightenment kind of began because of the scientific method, which kind of truncated reason, as Lewis would say, you know, into empirical evidence and testing and experiment and so on. And it left out. Well, that's one reason the Romantic Revival, I think, came after the Enlightenment. That this is man diminished. It's not man enhanced or ennobled, But and I think Chesterton in this book does precisely that, restoring the integrity of man. And that, as you say, influenced both Lewis and Tolkien.
Yeah. I would say something. I know Vivian would obviously say much on this also, but again about the reintegration of imagination into the fullness of the human. I mean, what is technological innovation? What is innovation except the employment of the imagination? That even the physical sciences require the imaginative faculties to make any progress whatsoever. So it's not as if imagination is something can be put over here amongst the arts, but it's not part of the sciences. On the contrary, it's something which transcends both the arts and the sciences because it's necessary to both.
Well, I think what happened with the Enlightenment and the rationalization or rationalism that came afterward was this reducing how we can know the truth down to a very narrow set of criteria. And the result was that myth became synonymous for false. Oh, that's just a myth, meaning that's not true. And so what happened was our access to the truth, our ability to apprehend truth as modern people got so truncated that you have people running around saying, well, there is no truth. It's all, I mean, they go to one extreme or the other. It's either only verifiable through scientific method, and those are facts, and those are the things you can know, or it's false. Or now you have people throwing over that out of disillusionment with the limits of science, because it is a limited thing, these scientific methods. And now it's there is no truth. It's whatever you feel. That's your truth. And so we have these weird extremes of extreme subjectivism on one hand, or an extreme kind of scientific uh, purityism over here. And now just the regular ordinary bloke, how does he know what's true? He doesn't even trust that he can know what's true. And so what these men did, Chesterton and Tolkien and Lewis, like you just said, reintegrating these faculties for apprehending the truth that include the imagination, that include your subjective reaction to things, that include the object that all these other things are trying to penetrate with understanding. And we're richer for it. We are so much richer for what these men have given us in being able to reintegrate ourselves and being able to say, how do you know what's true? Well, lots of different ways, quite frankly. And storytelling has always been, since people could talk, a method for teaching truth. The story unfolds, you learn about yourself, you learn about the character, you learn about all these things from a story. And as you said, Father, storytelling was Christ's chief way of teaching.
And this whole thing is rooted in Christ because he is the one who unites God and man in one person, right? And he unites the objective truth of science with subjective appreciation in poetry. I mean, it's true. I mean, Christ is the key. I mean, everything can be explained in terms of the incarnation. It really can. And in a certain sense, what our authors do, our favorite authors here, Chesterton, Lewis, and Tolkien, is they've just been elaborating on, developing, expanding upon the one center of truth, which is the God man. You know, Joseph,
Well, I was going to, yeah, okay. Page 106. I know you have it highlighted two facts: local sincerity and insincerity. So I do have a couple of sentences there I want to just read and comment upon briefly. So towards the bottom, 10 lines up from the bottom of page 106. The poet feels the mystery of a particular forest, not of the science of afforestation or the department of woods and forests. He worships the peak of a particular mountain, not the abstract idea of altitude. So we may find that God is not merely water, but often one special river. So I think the key thing here is that no poet or no person, because we're all poets, um, uh, loves landscape as an abstract thing. We all love particular incarnate manifestation of landscapes, particular places that are very special to us because we've been there and we've communed with that incarnation of a particular place. So it's what I call, you see it you see it all over it, but I mean, with Hilaire Belloc, for instance, what I call the theology of place. That a particular a forest or a particular landscape or a particular mountain is incarnated as something which manifests the glory of God.
And as you said before, particular places can somehow strike you in this kind of uncanny way. A particular tree, a particular it almost as if it has a personality. You can have this suddenly strange, uncanny connection to a particular tree or a particular spot beside a creek or whatever, a particular chunk of moss growing on a particular rock. And what is that? We all feel that. We all have those moments where we feel this kind of is there something else there? Is there someone home in this tree? There's this one set of trees up at our retreat house that if I were a pagan, that would be my grove of trees right there. There's something about the way
Yeah.
these trees look like they're dancing with each other. And you're like, oh my gosh, if I were a pagan, I would come in here and dance in the moonlight. So we all have these experiences. And what are they telling us, Joseph? What are all these experiences trying to tell us?
Yeah, I mean, the point is that you could dance, and you'd be a dance of gratitude to God, not the gods, right? Because that manifestation, that particular landscape, those particular trees in that particular place, dancing in that particular breeze, right, is something that we should take our breath away and we should thank God for. And dancing in the moonlight would be an appropriate way of doing that, quite frankly.
That we have this phenomenon at Yosemite National Park every February called the fire fall, where a particular waterfall, when the sun sets, it strikes the water in such a way that this waterfall literally looks like lava coming down the cliff. And there were record numbers of people who went to Yosemite this February to see it, film it, photograph it. All these people, their breath is just being taken away. And you could just say, oh, that's just refracted light and reflected this and the angle of the sun that and da 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 da. Well, wouldn't that take all the fun out of it? All these people like their breath is being caught,
Yeah.
you know? Why? Why do things like that strike us in that way? There's something going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like looking out into the Pacific Ocean saying, I wonder how many gallons are out there. Oh, no, it's immense. But on 106 and 107 is an important point he's going to make here. New paragraph on 106. Two facts follow from this psychology of day. That's what he's talking about when he's talking about mythology. These are daydreams, okay? Which must be kept in mind throughout their development in mythologies and even religions. First, these imaginative impressions are often strictly local. So we talked about that.
Yep.
Then on page 107, new paragraph, the second consequence is this, that in these pagan cults, there's every shade of sincerity and insincerity. He explains that a bit. In what sense exactly did the Athenian really think he had to sacrifice to Pallas Athene? What scholar is really certain of the answer? In what sense did Dr. Johnson really think he had to touch all the posts in the street or they had to collect orange peel? You can explain that, Joseph. But in what sense, this is good, does a child really think they ought to step on every alternate paving stone? I mean, did you do that as a kid?
Yep.
Did you ever go?
We tried not to step on the crack
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
in the sidewalk. Yeah.
But it wasn't like it was a creed or a rule.
No.
It
was a
but
game.
It was a game. It was something you had to do it, but and it was serious in the sense of being a serious game. But it wasn't like a moral precept you had to follow.
No, but if you stepped on one, you broke your mother's back. That
Okay.
right? Yes. Yes, that was a really mind-opening reading this the first time. The fact that people could both take these things unseriously, that helped me actually understand all the weird stuff in the Catholic Church. Because as he says on the next page on 108, he says, as a matter of fact, the Catholic Church has taken over with uproarious success the whole of this popular business of giving people local legends and lighter ceremonial movements. Insofar as all this sort of paganism was innocent and in touch with nature, there's no reason why it should not be patronized by patron saints as much as by pagan gods. And in any case, there are degrees of seriousness in the most natural make believe. And you know, the Europeans, they kind of take this in a lighthearted way. A lot of these festivals they still do because of Saint so and so and some legend about that happened here and blah blah blah. I mean, they're still partying and going out on the feast day and there's a part that believes it. Of course we believe it. And then there's a part that, well, that's unimportant whether it happened exactly like that. How they keep these two things in balance is
Yeah, I mean,
actually an
One
art.
one one of my favourite essays by Belloc's called "The Remaining Christmas," and he talks about all the rituals that the Belloc family does at Christmas, and one of them is the Yule log. And the rule about the Yule log, it has to be too heavy for one man to carry, so it has to be two men to carry it and put it on the blazing fire. Now, of course, Chet Belloc doesn't think the Yule log's as important as the Christ child, right? Obviously, right? The Yule log probably goes back to paganism, but it's part of the festivity. It's part of the fun, right? If you want to really enjoy Christmas, yeah, well, let's have the Yule log. I mean, but obviously there were there's a grading in terms of seriousness here. The Yule log's not up there in Bethlehem.
I was going to have Joseph read it. I'm going to read it. Not as good as Joseph, but it's easier than pointing it out to him. About 10 lines down 109. These are the myths, and he who has no sympathy with myths
Oh yeah.
has no sympathy with men.
That's the quote I was just thinking of. Okay, good.
Okay. But he who has most sympathy with myths will most fully realize that they are not and never were a religion in the sense that Christianity or even Islam is a religion. They satisfy some of the needs satisfied by religion, and notably, the need for doing certain things at certain dates, the need of the twin ideas of festivity and formality. But though they provide a man with a calendar for the feasts, they do not provide him with a creed. A man did not stay up and say, I believe in Jupiter and Juno and Neptune, etc., as he stands up and says, I believe in God, the Father, the Almighty, and so on. So here's this important thing you made. The idea of sincerity here. I mean, they really participate in these things as something part of real life, but also they don't take them as creedal, as some kind of a
Hmm.
description of a moral precepts and so on. And then on page 110, Joseph, where did you want to go to?
Well, you've got 113 with mine. I want to say something on page 113, but not prior to that.
Okay, well, uh, on page, uh, where is this? Is on page 110. Oh, the very bottom of the page there. When someone like Lewis or Chesterton says, I'm going to summarize, it's important to pay attention because often you kind of get lost in the weeds, but this is where they kind of bring it all together. The last paragraph there. The substance of all such paganism may summarize thus: is an attempt to reach the divine reality through the imagination alone. In its own field, reason does not restrain it at all. It is vital to the view of all history that reason is something separate from religion, even in the most rational of these civilizations. And then a few lines down, but in reality, the rivers of mythology, imagination, and philosophy, intellect, run parallel and do not mingle till they meet in the sea of Christendom. Simple secularists will talk as if the church had introduced a sort of schism between reason and religion. The truth is that the church was actually the first thing that ever tried to combine reason and religion.
Hmm.
There had never before been any such union of the priests and the philosophers. Mythology then sought God through the imagination or sought truth by means of beauty. And I want to quote C.S. Lewis here on page 218, footnote 1, where he says,
What book, Father?
oh, I'm sorry, yeah, sorry. This is Lewis's Miracles. He says, and this is so beautifully concise. Myth in general is not misunderstood history, as euhemerists thought, nor diabolical illusion, as some of the fathers thought, nor priestly lying, as the philosophers of the Eighth Enlightenment thought, but, so here's it, at best, a real, though unfocused gleam of divine truth falling on human imagination. Let me repeat that. Myth, at its best, is a real, though unfocused gleam of divine truth falling on human imagination. I mean, man, that summarizes it right there. I had Joseph, what do you want to do?
Page 113. You've got desire and doubt written in your notes here, and I was going to read the two short sentences at the end of that paragraph, page 113. I don't know if that's the particular passage you were thinking of.
Exactly.
Okay, so I may just read those two and comment briefly. So far could the lonely imagination lead, and we must turn later to the lonely reason. Nowhere along this road did the two ever travel together. And this is the key thing, that in Chesterton's book, The Man of His Thursday, is that the six philosophers, right, trying to understand God using reason. And they can only get so far, and then they have more questions than answers. God has to reveal himself to reason, for reason to get deeper. And so for reason needs revelation, but so does myth. That myth can tell stories and get so far and sort of have suggestions about deeper realities, but it can only go so far as storytelling without revelation. So both myth, storytelling, and reason require God to meet us through the revelation of himself. And that, of course, is exactly what Jesus Christ does.
Just before where you began reading, Joseph, in 113, middle of the page, he says, in a word, mythology is a search. It is something that combines a recurrent desire with a recurrent doubt, mixing the most hungry sincerity in the idea of seeking for a place with the most dark and deep and mysterious levity about all the places found. Again, that just repeats from a different angle what we've been saying here. Well, then continue where you read, Joseph. Says this is where all these things, that is mythology, differ from religion or the reality in which these different dimensions met in a sort of solid. They differ from the reality not in what they look like, but in what they were. A picture may look like a landscape. It may look in every detail exactly like a landscape. The only detail in which it differs is it is not a landscape.
That's so good.
The difference is only that which divides a portrait of Queen Elizabeth from Queen Elizabeth. Only in this mythical and mystical world, the portrait could exist before the person, and the portrait was therefore more vague and doubtful. That's beautiful. You know, how myths are a vague portrait of the truth that's going to be revealed later. We're running out of time. I wanted Joseph to read the bottom lines of page 114 or 115, I guess. The bottom lines. Oh, yeah. Starting, Joseph, we know better than the scholars.
Okay. So you want me to read that to the end of the paragraph as a way of concluding the episode?
Yeah.
Okay. We know better than the scholars, even those of us who are no scholars. What was in that hollow cry that went forth over the dead Adonis, and why the great mother had a daughter wedded to death? We have entered more deeply than they into the Eleusinian mysteries, and have passed a higher grade, where gate within gate guarded the wisdom of Orpheus. We know the meaning of all the myths. We know the last secret revealed to the perfect initiate. And it is not the voice of a priest or a prophet saying, these things are. It is the voice of a dreamer and an idealist crying, why cannot these things be?
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
It is.
Well, we're slowing down a bit, but we'll be back with the next episode. We'll start with chapter 6, the demons and philosophers, and maybe, hopefully, get to the war of the gods and the demons, and maybe the end of the world. We'll see what happens. Thanks, all. God bless you.